Colt and Hazel recently tied the knot. They were both 23 years old and resided in the same apartment as Colt's parents. A year back, Hazel gave birth to their child. Their paths crossed at a social gathering where mutual acquaintances had invited them. There, they engaged in an enthralling conversation, completely captivated by one another's presence. Hazel found herself drawn to Colt, a clever and attractive young man with ambitious dreams. Colt, on the other hand, approached her out of sheer boredom, seeking some amusement. He shared his post-graduation plans, which were set to unfold in a mere half-semester. Hazel attentively listened, as she had completed her studies in an art college and now worked as a teacher there. Financially stable, she couldn't help but envy Colt's aspirations, realizing she had never harbored any significant ambitions of her own. One day after her classes, Hazel made a deliberate choice to take a solitary stroll home, seeking solace. Living with Colt's parents had taken a toll on her spirit. The wintry outdoors embraced her, with a gentle frost kissing her cheeks and large snowflakes descending from the heavens. Deep in her thoughts, Hazel meandered down the street at a leisurely pace. She passed by the parked cars near the store and was about to turn the corner when the sound of someone exiting one of the vehicles caught her attention. They called out to her. Hazel turned, spotting a man standing in the parking lot, cheerfully waving in her direction. Focusing her gaze, she identified the man as her former beau, Kian. "Hey," she greeted him with a smile. Kian had been her youthful love, their relationship akin to a tempestuous storm. "Hey, long time no see." The man enveloped her in a warm embrace. Engrossed in conversation, they found themselves unable to part ways easily. However, as Hazel's phone began to ring, she saw it was Colt. He inquired why she hadn't returned home yet, as both he and their child awaited her. Hazel let out a sigh. Weariness and annoyance mingled within her like a massive lump. Reluctantly, she informed Kian that she had to go. In a gesture of kindness, he offered her a ride. As Hazel stepped out of the car, he requested that she leave her contact details. She hesitated momentarily, but eventually relented and whispered the numbers to him. The weight of responsibility tugged at her, knowing her loved ones awaited her at home. Colt's mother, upon Hazel's arrival, expressed her disapproval through a clucking of the tongue, signifying her discontent with her daughter-in-law. "Colt, let's find our own place," Hazel whispered, as they laid in bed, moments before they succumbed to slumber, their eyes fixed upon the ceiling above. "Just hold on a little longer. Everything will work out," Colt replied, his words barely audible, as he planted a tender kiss upon her shoulder. A week later, Kian reached out to Hazel, suggesting they should catch up. Initially, she was hesitant, crafting every excuse under the sun to avoid the meeting. Yet ultimately, Kian's persistent appeals won her over. They chose a cozy cafe close to where Hazel worked. During their rendezvous, she couldn't help but notice that Kian was still the courteous, warm, and attractive man she remembered, which genuinely struck a chord with her. She felt a pang of regret for tying the knot too early, missing out on exploring life further. As they settled in the cafe, they drifted into conversations about the mundane and the memorable from their shared history. When it came time to part ways, Kian once again offered to drive her home. The weather, however, had other plans. A heavy snowfall led to severe traffic delays. Hazel phoned her husband, using her extended work duties, particularly the academic reports she needed to finalize, as a valid excuse for her delayed return home. Trapped in the gridlock, Hazel and Kian slipped into easy, familiar dialogue, reminiscent of times long past, as if the years apart had merely evaporated. Hazel, dressed in a chic short dress, suddenly felt Kian's hand on her knee. Instinctively reaching down to remove it, she found herself instead seizing his hand firmly, holding onto it with the desperation of someone grasping for salvation. They walked the rest of the way in complete silence. "Let's stop here, away from home. I don't want anyone to notice me," the lady said, "but it's cold outside. I don't want to make unnecessary noise if the neighbors or my mother-in-law accidentally see me getting out of the car with a gentleman inside. They'll probably put on a dramatic performance when we get home, Hazel murmured with a hint of sadness. Kian leaned closer and planted a kiss on his ex-girlfriend's lips. Hazel, caught off guard, slapped him in the face in response and quickly jumped out of the car and rushed to her home. She tossed and turned in bed all night, thinking about recent events. The very thought of Kian was driving her crazy. Finally, in the morning, Hazel fell into a serene sleep. She dreamed exclusively of meetings with her former lover, and by noon the longing became unbearable, forcing her to write him a message begging him to meet. He came to her workplace with a bouquet of flowers. A smile lit up Hazel's face when she caught a glimpse of him in her office window. It had been ages since anyone had given her such flowers. "Let's go back to my abode," Kian suggested, getting into his car. Hazel agreed. Their meetings were infrequent, despite the man's insistent requests for regular communication, which Hazel stubbornly refused. Although she liked to feel wanted, she understood that she was involved in a serious deception, and it gnawed at her from the inside. She loved her husband, but her relationship with Kian was completely different. One day, following another intimate moment, Kian approached Hazel with a deep sigh and asked her to initiate divorce proceedings. For more than 3 months, they had been meeting in secrecy, and he was growing weary of the clandestine nature of their relationship. "Hazel, I'm a fully fledged adult. I crave certainty, not this ambiguity," he reasoned. Hazel, however, pleaded for patience, expressing her anxiety that her husband might sever ties with their young son post-divorce, leaving him without his father's attention. Taking matters into his own hands, Kian decided it was time for action. Colt, working as an editor at a modest publishing house, was in for a surprise. One ordinary day, a colleague approached him and mentioned that someone was waiting for him on the first floor, near the entrance. Confusion set in as Colt descended the stairs, convinced it was yet another disgruntled author, unhappy with his editorial decisions. "Are you here for me?" Colt inquired cautiously, contrary to his assumption. The man introduced himself. "Hello, I'm Kian. There's something important we need to discuss," he declared, gesturing towards the exit for a cigarette break. With a nod, Colt agreed, albeit hesitantly. "Make it quick, please. I've got to get back to my desk soon," he pressed. "This news may come as a shock to you," Kian began. "You might even be tempted to strike me, but I hope we can approach this rationally. After all, we are grown-ups." With a heavy heart, the man disclosed that he and Hazel had been involved romantically for a number of months now. He expressed his desire for Colt to grant her a divorce, believing that Hazel was unhappy in her marriage. Colt was dumbfounded. He stood by Kian's side, absently scraping at a crack in the asphalt with the tip of his shoe. He was completely unprepared for Kian's revelation. He had always believed that their family was thriving. In fact, he had been eagerly anticipating the moment he could inform his wife that he had saved enough money for them to purchase a modest, yet cozy apartment of their own. "I propose that we arrange a face-to-face meeting with Hazel, the 3 of us together," the husband suggested. They diligently plotted their approach, ensuring that Hazel remained oblivious to the true purpose of the meeting. A few days later, when Kian invited her to a cafe, Hazel eagerly accepted. As they sat down and placed their coffee orders, Colt suddenly appeared before them. Hazel's eyes widened in terror. Here she was, caught between 2 men, her illicit lover and her husband, both seated across from her, their gazes fixed on her with anticipation. "Give me your opinion on this," her husband demanded. Hazel remained silent. Suddenly, he exploded, exclaiming, "Say something about this situation. Why did this man barge into my workplace and show how much I displease you by claiming that you 2 had a long-term affair?" His last words echoed throughout the cafe. Several visitors looked at this strange trio. Hazel tried to defend herself by coaxing her husband to keep his voice down, but he only got more agitated. In the end, feeling humiliated and disgraced, Hazel ran out of the cafe in tears. The men sat in silence for a while before parting. A month later, Hazel and Colt divorced. Colt spent his savings on buying an apartment for himself alone. Hazel broke off her relationship with Cheyenne again. She couldn't forgive him for single-handedly destroying her marriage without her knowledge. Hazel and her child moved back in with their parents because, as a teacher, she couldn't afford to rent a place for both of them. In the end, Hazel was left with nothing, despite her desperate attempt to get her way in both ways.